As fuel situation takes a worrisome turn, Nigerians seek answers.
Justice Ministry seeks amendment of Act establishing Code of Conduct Bureau and the Tribunal.
House investigates allegations of excess charges on transactions by deposit money banks.
Good morning, Nigeria. Today, we shall discuss issues in power supply in Nigeria today.
Now, on Monday, this week, Nigerians received notice from electricity distribution companies, DISCOs, apologizing for the collapse of the national grid. A few days later, another collapse occurred again, making this the second in 48 hours.
Now, in the past 1 month, the national grid has been epileptic with just about 2,000 megawatts of electricity. And indeed, since 2013, when Nigeria's power sector was privatized, industry watchers have been concerned about the national grid collapsing just too many times.
And indeed, the current development is as a result of bickerings among operators, leading to an emergency meeting of all stakeholders on Monday this week at the instance of the Ministry of Power.
Now, generating companies, also known as GENCOs, have placed the blame on the Transmission Company of Nigeria, that's TCN, insisting that most of its turbines, that's to say the GENCO's turbines, have been damaged by insufficient management of the grid.
And they also drew attention to a debt of 1.64 trillion naira owed them by the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC, and NBED, that is.
Now, several challenges have, of course, affected the country's power sector. Some include infrastructural constraints across the entire value chain, inability to reduce aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses, insufficient end-user traffic, as well as pricing.
And other issues include the sector's cash shortfalls, debt, electricity theft, non-payment culture of the public, sector governance, and so on. These issues inform our focus on issues in power supply in Nigeria today. Welcome to today's episode of Good Morning Nigeria. I am Yusuf Nadabo Usman.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Nadabo to also welcome you to the program live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Well, Nadabo, we're just discussing before we came on air that there is no part of Nigeria today that is not feeling the poor power supply that we've been experiencing for some weeks now.
Just everybody and everything is affected.
Absolutely.
Really. Everything else.
And this has been compounded by the fact that the alternative power supply, which is to say the use of generators, has itself been compromised by the relative unavailability of diesel, and when it's available, in some parts it's about 800 naira per liter. And petrol, of course, is also scarce in several parts of the country. Now, some offices are beginning to ration their power use if they are on generators. Of course, we shall have that discussed in our conversation segment. And before then, we'll also take our complementary segments of newspaper review and business. For now, here's Dennis Adegunloye, who has the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Dennis.
Yes, good morning, Kingsley, and good morning, Nadabo. Good morning, Nigerians. Here is
Dennis, I'm sure you have light in your area. That's why you are smiling.
I'm not smiling because of light issue. That's definitely not the case, but it's always good to smile. They say smile is good for the health.
Thank you.
Good morning, Nigerians. Here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari says he regrets the inconveniences caused to citizens over the prolonged shortage of petroleum products, a situation which his administration has successfully arrested in the past 7 years while in office. Meanwhile, the fuel situation, which seems to be improving, has taken a worrisome turn. Motorists are attributing this to the unruly behavior of drivers trying to cut corners and jump the queues.
As we are watching, one tanker came and dropped fuel, not quite long, discharged fuel and left. They refused to sell. We heard that they will be selling around 9.
They no open gate for us. We there here since 8 o'clock. They no open. Now from front, the motor they enter. We don't know what we do. We don't know what we do them. They are bringing the motor enter from front for big men people. See the car. See all the car where they say jeep. Now they enter from front.
And as the federal government continues to intervene in the power, road and other sectors with the aim of putting in place critical infrastructure that will lead to national developments, it also seeks to strengthen the powers of the Code of Conduct Bureau and that of the tribunal. To this end, the Ministry of Justice is seeking amendments to the act that established the two institutions. This was during the FEC meeting held on Wednesday in Abuja.
Power on the grid has dropped due to those things that affected it, lack of gas and the maintenance that some of the generators are undergoing.
The realignment of the Kano State border, Birnin Kudu Bauchi State border road. The second project approved is the reconstruction of a substandard bridge at Pada Road in Kogi State. The third project is the construction of the Kayama Kishi Road in Oyo Kwara states. The last but not the least is the reconstruction of a substandard bridge along Ihiu, Damkuri, Bandekia General Hospital Junction, Ogoja Road in Benue/Cross River states.
Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, says Nigeria is advancing the fight against corruption both locally and internationally. The AGF and Minister of Justice, in one of the two items presented to the Federal Executive Council for consideration, says Nigeria sponsored an international resolution relating to assets recovery, which now places the country on a high level in the fight against corruption. And Nigerians are hoping for an end in sight over the epileptic power supply in the country, as the federal government says gas supply has been restored to generating plants. Chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, Sanusi Garba, says the recent cases of grid collapse, which disrupted electricity supply, have also been addressed to forestall a future occurrence.
Restored to the Opai plant. We also have the Niger Delta power plants. Most of them are affected of gas shortages because they haven't contracted officially for gas. Now, the discussion we have had in the last 24 hours has been for the Nigerian Gas Marketing Company to now contract for gas for those plants.
The House of Representatives Committee on Banking and Currency has been mandated to look into allegations of excess charges on transactions by deposit money banks. This is in response to a motion from Representative Sergius Ogun, who noted that the Central Bank of Nigeria had in January 2020 issued guidelines on charges to financial institutions. The aim, he added, was to stop indiscriminate imposition of charges by deposit money banks. House members pointed out that despite the guidelines, most banks in Nigeria deduct outrageous amounts as charges that are not statutory on transactions carried out by customers. The committee is to carry out the assignment within 4 weeks. President Muhammadu Buhari has directed that the issue of the leadership of the Caretaker Extraordinary Convention Planning Committee should immediately return to the status quo. In a letter personally signed by him to Governor Atiku Bagudu of Kebbi State, who is also the chairman of the Progressives Governors Forum, President Buhari also directed that all members of the Governors Forum and their followers should desist from any behavior or utterances that will likely lead to disunity in the ranks of the party and ultimately jeopardize the transition to the convention. He also directed that the May Malabuni-led Caretaker Extraordinary Convention Planning Committee should accordingly be allowed to proceed with all necessary preparations to hold the convention as planned unfailingly on 26th of March 2022. The president said that the multiplicity of cases currently rocking the party has the prospect of invalidating the activities and actions of the party by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. Well, that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues after this break with Nadabo and Kingsley. Good morning.
The International Monetary Fund, IMF, projects that Nigeria might use 93% of her revenue to repay debts by the end of 2022. Details with Alika Opanachi Arua on our business segment.
The International Monetary Fund also predicted that by 2026, 139% of the nation's income would be used to pay debt interest. This projection was provided in a report where it said that the interest-to-revenue ratio will rise steadily from 86% in 2021, adding that a high interest-to-revenue ratio puts the country at fiscal risk. The report says although interest payments were only 2% of gross domestic in 2020, about 89% of federal government revenues were absorbed by interest payments, reflecting poor domestic revenue mobilization capacity. Meanwhile, oil prices fell below $100 a barrel in a volatile session on Wednesday as it came under pressure from signs of progress in Russia-Ukraine peace talks. Ukraine's president said the positions of Ukraine and Russia were sounding more realistic, but time was needed. Brent crude fell 54 cents, or 0.5%, to $99.37 a barrel in early trade, having traded as high as $103 earlier. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude slipped 96 cents or 1% to $95.48. The price fall also followed the release of International Energy Agency's monthly report that cut its oil demand forecast for 2022. And taking a look at Wednesday tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Opanachi Arua.
Many thanks, Alika, for the business package. Up next, newspaper review.
Oh, well, Bayo Achebi is already in the house here. Welcome, Bayo.
Thank you, Yusuf. Good morning. Good morning, Kensley.
Good morning.
Nigeria.
How is the power situation in your area?
Well, there's no power in my area for nearly a week now.
Right.
Yes.
Oh,
So even the grid that is being restored has not reached my own location.
Oh, there is darkness in your area.
In fact, not only darkness. At morning here, there was haze and dust haze, so much so the visibility is below 200 meters.
So you have double jeopardy there.
Yes, people who are driving now will have to be very, very careful. I cannot imagine what it would be like in Maiduguri and Kano if Abuja is like this.
Oh, well, let's get into the papers and see what the peoples have for Nigerians today this morning. Let me get started with the Nation, Kingsley. Yeah, the Nation newspaper, please, if you can have that on the screen. At the top, ahead of the top of the masthead, we have a story on page 5, and that's talking about PDP NEC fails to OK zoning and then pay 40 million naira for phone. All right, PDP NEC fails to OK zoning and pay 40 million naira for phone. Now that's on page 5. And on page 2, El-Rufai tells Masari tells ambitious aides to resign. The two governors are asking ambitious aides to resign if they want to contest. Get details of that on page 2. And still on page 2, Malami, the Attorney General says, we are seeking options on Electoral Act. Coming down, Niger workers begin indefinite strike. It is written here on page 29, but after a little search, I found that only on page 3. On page 29, the story isn't there. And on page 5, Solidar Tax Office in Anambra. The big story or the main story on the Nation newspaper is Buhari to APC governors. Buni remains party chair. The writer is President Buhari insists on March 26 convention date. And the second one is Yobe governor back, cancels NEC meeting. Moving down, federal government to stop payment for unused electricity. So move down, really down there, we get senators, reps, pledge support for Tinubu. And finally, at the foot of the page, we have 2 soldiers and the others held for robbery in Borno. Details of that on page 27. And finally, on page 29, we have residents, scavengers clash. Yes,
All right. Let me take some stories also from the front page of the Punch newspaper. The lead, of course, is on politics. Nadabo already read out a similar headline. El-Rufai, other APC governors lose out. Buni meets Buhari, returns today. APC chairs Palace president in the UK, returns from Dubai trip, cancels NEC meeting. Party may die if crisis continues, Buhari warns. Directs DSS and police to provide cover. Now, above the nameplate, you have the following headlines. Bank's total assets rose by 8.25 trillion naira in 2021. That's according to a CBN report. Blackout. Federal government blames gas shortage, vandalism, and OK's 440 billion naira for discos. National Assembly proposing criminalizing illegal connection and meter bypass. Electoral Act, federal government exploring court and talks on amendments, says Attorney General of the Federation. NJC, that's the Judicial Council, places judge on watch list, warns another for misconduct. PDP presidential aspirant forms to cost 40 million naira. As presidential aspirant. Yesterday, we were discussing the forms for the chairmanship position of the APC, put at 20 million naira.
30 million.
All right. So, and then the photographs there. Most port scanners are obsolete, says Customs CG. Most port scanners are obsolete, says Customs CG. And the response will be fix them or replace them. Resign if nursing political ambition, El-Rufai tells appointees and officials. Ganduje sacks Kano Chambers ESCO for failing to hold election. Katsina SSG hints at resignation, says governorship bid not do or die. Tinubu berates presidential aspirants over defections, sells bid at National Assembly. Benue residents flee as bandits threaten to avenge 4 members' killing. So what's the apostrophe doing after bandits there? That's a devil's intrusion. APC chairmanship, Yari shuns zoning, buys 20 million naira phone.
Thank you, Kingsley. Well, the Vanguard is reporting that the president has apologized for the prevailing fuel queues that is refusing to go, as well as the collapse of the national grid, assuring that measures are being taken to remedy them all. Meanwhile, the Minister of Power, Engineer Abubakar Aliyu, has blamed the last collapse of the national grid and power outages to shortages in gas supply. He indicates that a small committee has been set up with the national grid restored, and the authority of the small committee is to get more megawatts onto the national grid. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has written to the progressive governor of the All Progressive Congress and warned that removing the chairman of the Extraordinary Convention Planning Committee could lead to implosion of the party. He accordingly says that multiplicity of court cases ensuing from the party activities portends invalidation of all party activities by the Independent National Electoral Commission. Accordingly, he has directed that, firstly, the leadership of the chairmanship of the convention extraordinary party should immediately return to status quo ante. Secondly, all members of the Governors Forum should desist from acts of disunity that can jeopardize the transition of the to the March 26 convention. Thirdly, the May Malabuni-led committee should proceed with arrangement for the 26th March convention. A letter has been accordingly sent to copy to the Governor Abubakar Sani Bello, who was acting while Governor May Malabuni was away, and the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, as well as Director General of the Department of State Services and the Inspector General of Police. The National Executive Committee meeting, originally scheduled for today, has been cancelled. Meanwhile, the People's Democratic Party has fixed 40 million for nomination form for presidential aspirants. This incorporates expression of interest for a cost of 5 million and nomination for 35 million. The approval came from the 95th National Executive Committee meeting of the party held in Abuja yesterday. From the guideline release, it showed that for the governorship expression of interest, candidates are expected to pay 1 million, while nomination is 20 million. That is a total of 21 million. Senatorial expression of interest attracts 500,000, while nomination is 3 million, therefore 3.5 million. For House of Representatives, you have to express interest with 500,000, and the nomination you pay 2 million. To aspire to the State House of Assembly across the country, you have to pay 100,000 as expression of interest and nomination fee of 500,000, total 600,000. Youths within the age bracket of 25 to 30 years have 50% reduction in nomination fees across board. The National Executive Committee meeting also approved the establishment of a 37-member zoning committee. They are to make recommendations for zoning of various elective positions for the 2023 general elections. Meanwhile, at the National Assembly yesterday, the national leader of the All Progressive Congress, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, held meeting with all progressive members of both chambers of the National Assembly. He says he's going by the adage, if you want to go faster, go together. He's therefore asking for the team support of the National Assembly legislators to get nominated and eventually elected as president. He visited the Senate and the House of Representatives to support his ambition based on capacity and experience. The era of Willie Obiano as governor of Anambra is expected to end today, as Professor Charles Chukwuma Soludo will be sworn in as the governor of Anambra State. It is expected to be a brief ceremony in front of the government house with only limited invited guests. The governor-elect is expected to appear in Akwete dress, which is a symbol of reviving a traditional attire native to Anambra that he wants to project. He says that he will come there with his sleeves rolled up to indicate that he is set to work. And in fact, his first work is to begin at Okpoko, a slum community very close to Onitsha. His official vehicle is also to be made in Anambra.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Bayo. We are running against time. This morning we have a lot to discuss, talking about power supply in Nigeria.
Yes.
You see, we have around maybe an area of guests, around 6 of them. So I'm afraid we've got to call it quits here on the newspaper. Thank you so much for being part of it. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We shall be back in a moment. Stay with us.
Electricity supply is what every Nigerian is talking about, expressing their grievances over the current power outages experienced across the country. Residents of Abuja and environs say they are finding it difficult to keep up with their daily lives, pointing out that it came at a challenging time coupled with rising petrol prices, and that they rely heavily on fuel to power their generators.
Monday morning, no light. Even yesterday, light went off around 12 in the afternoon. Today, no light. Everybody is destabilized.
So if there is no light, no work.
What would we work with? When everything is automated, when we have to process things using our computers, how will you work?
When we are experiencing in our area, we cannot even see light. You cannot get water, no fuel. You cannot back up in your jet, no light, nothing you see. So because of this power, it's creating a lot of difficulties for life.
It's even getting worse, day in, day out. And unfortunately, maybe the government is handicapped. They don't know what to do about it. Because what you hear today, the system collapsed today, system is collapsing tomorrow, and the thing is not getting better. We don't know how they were going to revive the situation. Look at this, as big as these offices. They took the light since 9 o'clock. As I'm talking to you, this is to 2. No light.
This period now, you need to work and all the rest, but now no lights. We are just like, it's not easy, and the heat.
Media reports making rounds indicate that the national power grid had a system collapse, which disrupted power supply, making power generation drop drastically all over the country. This is not the first time the national grid has failed. It occurred back in 2021 among other occasions, and the power blackouts in some parts of the country have lingered for months, a development which had led to load shedding in the affected areas. The distribution companies confirmed the development through social media, informing their customers of the situation in several states. What necessary actions has the federal government taken in addressing the current electricity outages experienced in the country? When will Nigerians have undisrupted power? These and more guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be talking about.
All right, that was the background to this conversation. It's an existential experience that we're all having right now in Nigeria. Would like to welcome many guests for today's conversation. We've assembled 6, 7 of them, and that's because of the intensity of the challenge that we're having right now. Let's welcome the Managing Director of the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN. That's Dr. Sule Abdulaziz. Dr. Abdulaziz, pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Also here with us from the Transmission Company of Nigeria is the Executive Director in charge of Independent Systems Operations, Engineer Maman Lawal. Engineer Lawal, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
We were expecting the Jenkos to be part of this conversation. They're not immediately available now, but let's welcome Bode Fadikpe. Bode Fadikpe is the CEO of Sage Consulting and Communications. He had, of course, previously served as General Manager at the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. Fadikpe, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, viewers.
Okay.
Joining us in our Lagos studio is Mr. Odion Omon-Foreman, energy expert and Chief Executive Officer, New Hampshire Group. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria, Fadi.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on your program.
So also we have joining us from Kaduna is Idris Muhammad, Corporate Communications Department, Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
Thank you once again. Via Zoom is Dr. Naim Meka Eweluka, the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading PLC, the NBED. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me on your program.
Thank you.
All right. Once again, gentlemen, I'd like to have you with us today, even though it's not a particularly sweet subject to discuss, considering one more time the experience that we're having. Beginning with the Managing Director of TCN, Dr. Sule Abdulaziz. What is happening?
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you for the opportunity given to us to come and explain to Nigerians what is happening. Actually, for almost a week, we have some issue with the grid. And this is to the fact that most of these generation stations that are generating light have one issue or the other. Most of the issues are related with lack of gas. Some of the units are out, they have no gas to put them on. Some are on general maintenance, whereas we have one or two issues of vandalization. A line was vandalized and we lost 3 units at Okpai. So all this contributed to the number of megawatts that is coming to the grid. Almost 2-3 years in this country, what we normally have every day is around 5,000 megawatts. Sometimes it will go down to 4,000 or 3,500. But with this situation we are, now the megawatts run down to almost 3,000 and 3,000 plus. Now the grid is very fragile. It cannot stand all these changes. And unfortunately on Monday, we had system disturbances, meaning that the grid went down. The same thing happened on Tuesday, but thank God we were able to restore the plant. And as of today, we are generating around 3,400. So we're assuring Nigeria that we're on the top of the situations and things are getting better by now.
But looking at going into history, let me say, at a point in time in this country, we were able to generate 7,000, and that was a hooray all over the place. People are happy that things are getting better. And here we are today, we've fallen down to below 4,000. I mean, that sounds like deep progression, if I may use the word.
Yes, sir, it's true. What we have now, we have installed capacity of around 13,000 megawatts. So if all these units will work and there are no concern of gas, no concern of water on the hydro, we are we'll be able to generate 13,000, not even 7,000 you are talking about. So it's just because of some factors, that's why we are not getting the required megawatts this country needs.
Dr. Abdulaziz, thank you. We indicated that we were expecting a guest from the Gencos. The guest hasn't come. Otherwise, we would have discussed the question that arises from the comments made by Dr. Abdulaziz to say the Gencos are not generating enough power and therefore you have insufficient power to transmit, and that results in grid instability. But we have read and also heard that part of the issues relating to gas supplies has to do with indebtedness. Some figures have been banded running into over ₦1 trillion that is being owed by NBET, which is the electricity bulk trading company. And we have the managing director of the NBET, Dr. Nemeka Eweluka, who was introduced a moment ago. Dr. Eweluka, what is the role of NBET in the indebtedness equation that is also probably, if not most likely, responsible for the current power situation in the country?
Morning. Thank you very much for the question. Just to be clear, the NBET role in the power sector is an intermediary, a temporary intermediary that functions between the distribution and generation segments of the value chain. Let it also be known that the federal government has shown absolute commitment to ensuring the survival of the power sector. And specifically as it pertains to NBET, that means ensuring that even as critical reforms are going on, that payments continue to be made to the generation segment to ensure that there's continuity. Till date, NBET has paid close to 90% of the total invoices of generation companies issued from 2015 till date. And that shows solid commitment, particularly at a time when downstream reforms at the distribution segment of the value chain are still taking place. And so currently, what you find is that the federal government is holistically addressing the power sector challenges on two fronts. One, the liquidity challenges of the market, which is where NBET plays in, making sure that the core issues driving the funding challenge of the market are being addressed. But secondly, also reforms aimed at sorting out the infrastructural challenges of the power sector. So the narrative regarding NBET role is that NBET really is the vehicle through which the federal government is channeling serious funding to that is meant to support the upstream segment of the value chain, that is generation companies, and that the current situation we have at the moment is not really something that you can say it's a generation problem. It's a holistic problem. It's a value chain problem, and what you find is that the federal government is also addressing those issues holistically, which is why, of course, you had the meeting earlier held this week by the Honourable Minister of Power that involved critical stakeholders aimed at ensuring that we don't sort of get into sometimes in a crisis situation. There's a tendency to engage in finger pointing, but what you find is that the federal government is also trying to ensure that beyond finger pointing, beyond sound bites, that concrete reforms are actually being done. And so the meeting held earlier on Monday had the critical players within the room: NERC, TCN, NBET, NDPHC, NNPC, with private stakeholders like SPDC, Shell Petroleum in the room. And that tells you that there's a dogged commitment on the part of the government to get to the root of the challenges we are facing, but not just to solve it as an emergency, but to address it holistically, to ensure that we don't just solve one emergency onto the next emergency, but rather that we have an in-depth fixing of the root causes of the problem. Thank you very much.
Dr. Iweluka, against the background of what Dr. Sule Abdulaziz said, there are issues of greed, of course, issues of lack of gas, maintenance, and then the vandalization of, lines to say. With this 1.6 trillion naira or so being owed, how do we now say that we'll be able to get over this challenge, given the fact that you are in charge of the bulk of the electricity that is being provided, or rather being put forward to Nigerians as intermediary from the gencos to the consumers? And by that, it means that this one is still being owed, and they are complaining of these very issues as facts.
To be clear, the indebtedness is about 1/3 of that. It's about 1/3 of that. The government, like I said, through NBET, has paid close to 90% of what is owed generation companies. So the current debt, just to be clear, is about 1/3 of that, about 555 billion, excluding interest.
Okay, Dr. Iweluka, we're going to pause you in the meantime and then bring in Engineer Mama Lawal, Executive Director, Independent Systems Operations. Engineer Lawal, you heard Iweluka say there that this is not a case of finger pointing, that what we are having are issues along the value chain. What are these issues?
Thank you very much for bringing me in at this point. Yes, he put it quite aptly. As a matter of fact, we have always tried to adopt system thinking, in our assessment of the state of the Nigerian electric power grid. Like they say, a link, it's as a chain is as strong as the weakest link. So if you take out any of the segments, it is impossible to have a performance of any measure. The MD in his opening remarks talked about plant's unavailability, paucity of gas, and the issues of water management. These are the pivots of the problems we have had to grapple with, in the last couple of weeks. I must observe quickly, if you will permit me, that what's happened in the last couple of days, is like casting shadow on the performance profile of the sector. We take it this way. In 2017, we had collapse incidents, numbering 15. The following year, it dropped to 12. Subsequently, we had 9, 4, and only last year we recorded only 2 incidents of system collapse. As a matter of fact, we have always strived to ensure we don't record any, major disturbance. But it does happen that on account of the existing grid configuration, we'll have to, contend with this until we're able to, turn things around. And I must observe also that the government had been trying so hard to ensure that the requisite infrastructure that will foster development and growth altogether are being worked out. So you will observe from the figures I gave that with every passing year there has been a sustained improvement in grid stability. So that has been the drive, and we expect to take this further in due course.
How many systems collapse have we had this year?
2.
But
last year we had 2.
The entire year?
Last year. Yes. And for a period of 229 days, we did not record any incident of system collapse.
So why are we having system collapse this year, back to back, when for the entire period of last year, we had only 2 incidents? And then these same issues of maintenance, vandalism of pipelines, gas and water management, did they arise or they were?
It's actually a spot occurrence, from the trend we have sought to establish. As the MD put it, when the first incident occurred, the integrity of the grid became compromised. So it was quite easy that even, the least perturbation, would drive the grid to the edge. That was what happened when we had the second, collapse. I mean, the one that occurred on Tuesday. Otherwise, we have been able to, grapple with, the difficulties of keeping the grid stable amid major decline in generation, exacerbated by the factors here enumerated.
Okay, thank you so much, Engineer Lawan. Bode Fadupe, it seems we are yet to come to terms with the grid's collapse as being explained by, Engineer Lawan here. I mean, give us your assessment of this recent development and how do you think it's going to be somewhat resolved, if possible?
Well, thank you once again for having me. The current situation that we have in this country is a very, very disturbing one. I think we must be frank enough to admit that fact. Because if you do a comparative analysis between what the power sector of Nigeria was and what the power sector of Nigeria is today, there are quite a number of people on the Nigerian streets that will say that let's go back to NEPA, because even in terms of nomenclature, people are still referring to the current power sector as NEPA. Speak to even very little children. The moment power is restored, they will say up NEPA. And when supply goes up, they will also respond in the same way, oh, NEPA. So it must mean that there seems to be some bit of preference for what was and some bit of discomfort with what is. If you look at the reason why the privatization came up in the first instance, you will find out that all of the indicators that government looked forward to, none of them has been achieved. One of them is that this sector will be another stream of income for federal government. This sector will trigger or catalyze the development and growth of the Nigerian economy. This sector will also be a sector where government will not be providing fund again, But look at what fund the government has provided since privatization up to this time. If that fund had been given to the old system, we can say confidently now that that system will not remain the way it was as at the time of privatization. So let's give kudos to TCN. They were able to manage the grid up to the point where they had just 2 system disturbances last year and 2 this year. But speaking concerning the current situation, the truth of the matter is that this is a fight between MBET and GENCOs. As a matter of fact, the figure that was quoted this morning as 1.6 trillion, GENCO will tell you that that figure is more than that. About 2 or 3 days ago, I and Joy Ogaji were on a different program again, and she said the figure is about 3.6 trillion. And that's what Nigerians are suffering from. The fight between NBET and GENCOs. Yes, with due respect to Dr. Eweluka, 90% of the amount has been paid, and what is left is just 500 million. But GENCO is saying that that is not the figure. So where is the disagreement? What actual figure is the figure that they want us to take? I think these 2 bodies should resolve their differences and stop Nigerians from suffering this double whammy that we are having in the country. There is no fuel to power your private generators, and then even the public power supply is not available for you to use. So you want Nigerians to go to Russia or to go to Ukraine? Where do you want us to go to? It's so disturbing, quite frankly. It's so disturbing. And people are saying that federal government develop the courage to look at the entire power sector again. For 8 years, we have been running this race. We have not told a new story in the power sector. Before privatization, we were saying meter was not enough. Is meter sufficient now? Before privatization, we were saying that the grid, what is available in the grid is not enough. Is it enough now? Before privatization, we were saying that the power to run our industries is not enough. Is it enough now? What new story have we told in the power sector? We have not told any new story.
Bode Fadekwe, thank you very much. After the program, we're going to send you to Russia or Ukraine. All right. Thanks a lot for the very valuable points you have raised. We would give the NBET CEO an opportunity to respond to that. But earlier we introduced from our Lagos Network Center, Mr. Odion Omofoma, a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, energy expert and CEO, New Hampshire Group. Odion, well, it looks the way you are, it looks like you are not affected by the current power situation in the country. You're all spruced up and all smiles, but we know that there is some pain underneath all of that. Just tell us, because you're an expert in this field. We've had you in the past when we're discussing the power sector. This gas issue, why is it still persisting? That's one. 2, they say they are having maintenance. So you don't schedule your maintenance? If you are in production, for instance, do you just shut down all your systems at the same time that you're having maintenance?
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are back here to talk about the same issue we spoke last, system collapse. But beyond system collapse, I also think we need to talk about the poor quality of power supply generally that we experienced over the last 2-3 months. And it's shocking that we've had these conversations every year. They say there's water management, gas issues. This is not the first time we would experience dry season. The dry season starts to set in from November and it extends to March, April, thereabouts. So you would expect that there should be some form of planning. You just touched on a very key point, scheduled maintenance. Why would you have gas companies schedule the maintenance of their plants when hydros are ramping down because of water management? So there's a complete failure of planning in the sector, complete failure. It doesn't matter if MBET owes 1.6 trillion or 500 trillion. By the way, I think the 1.6 trillion is an exaggeration, but 500 billion is $1 billion, $1 billion plus dollars. So imagine owing people $1 billion. Right, so there's a big problem there. But let's even leave that aside. The fact that you are having crisis meeting at the tail end at the crisis period. This meeting should have been had. The meeting that the minister had should have happened sometime in November, because then you would know which plants are going for scheduled maintenance. The hydros, Kandi, Jeba, Shiro will be ramping down because of water level. So you need to have gas available, right? You don't do all that meeting. You don't do all that planning. And then a small disturbance on the grid, it knocks off the grid,
because you don't have any system capacity to manage it. So it's very ironic that the minister is having a meeting of all the stakeholders in a crisis period when this meeting should have happened 5 months ago. The second part I'd like to talk about is the money aspect. We keep talking about TCN and holding TCN accountable for a lot of these issues. Whilst I may struggle to absolve the TCN MD, in real sense, it's not a TCN problem in the core sense of this. Because the truth of the matter is that some of these issues are beyond TCN control. So what tripped up the grid? My understanding is that some militants went to blow up a pipeline in Braz and caused Ajib to do a force majeure. That knocked off a pie, and then that obviously triggered the system collapse. So that's beyond TCN's control. But here's the thing: you have a situation whereby Kanji again was off, generation was low, and the demand was high. You will knock off the grid. So you would expect that from day one, Embed will start to firm up gas supply, even if it's an interim arrangement with Shell and the other parties. We will supply you gas. These are the stations that will have power. NIPPs are there. They're dead. They're not operating. They don't have PPAs. They don't have any contract to sell power to the grid. They don't have gas supply contracts with the producers other than Calabar Power Plant. So we're running things 8 years. We've been running on without contracts. So how do you expect the market to stabilize? So Embed keeps talking about they're doing their best and all they do is settle. The truth of the matter is there's a contract management process. So if a power plant is supposed to go on scheduled maintenance, Embed has the right, as the party who buys that power from the power plant, to say, look, we have these issues. This is supply. This is demand. You need to postpone your scheduled maintenance because we need capacity during this period. You need to manage our whole sector. Nobody's doing that. So that's why you have these small disturbances knock off the grid. And we're going to have this same conversation next year, this same time next year, because this is the peak of the dry season. This is when the demand for power is high. And unfortunately, nobody has planned that when the hydros are low, the thermal plants will kick off. And the thermal plants need gas. Nobody has firmed up with Shell, Seplat, ITU, and other producers that give us spare gas. Even if it's in this period, we'll pay you. So it's hard for gas suppliers to say we'll commit more gas when you owe us more than $1 billion. We need to address this whole thing. And quite frankly, we're going to sit in this program next year and have this conversation.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Odion. And of course, you made some valid points there. And these points are not the ones who are supposed to come back and talk about again next year. We should be talking about some improvements, I believe. But in the meantime, before we really, put the bulk of the questions back to, Dr. Sula Abdulaziz, let's move over to Kaduna and then meet Idris Muhammad, Corporate Communications Department, Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company. Idris, you've been part of the discussion. At least you've heard the guests speak and you've really had their views. Tell it, in this very sense of the word that Nigerians are really suffering and everybody else is being affected in the sense that power is the driving force for almost everything we do. And it is, of course, the strength of our economy. How has it been with you in Kaduna and, of course, being a metropolitan city and the distribution there, given the fact that people have not really having it easy all over the country? What is your assessment of this system collapse and how has it affected you?
Thank you, Yusuf. I think we in the distribution layers of the value chain bear most of the brunt because the electricity consuming public knows nobody but us. So we are their eyes, we are their ears, and as far as they are concerned, we are the producers, transmitters, and distributors of electricity. They know nothing about generation companies. They don't know anything about Embed. They don't know anything about TCN. All they know is distribution companies. So actually, it has not been easy. It has not been easy for us at the distribution layer. Having said that, I want to admit that perhaps a little bit late, but I've started seeing more synergy and more concern, more teamwork amongst the critical stakeholders in the electricity value chain. Unlike in the past, most often the blames are always pushed at the doorsteps of the distribution companies. But I've now seen a situation where the active players in the value chain are now coming together, sitting down, discussing the issue, and of course, disagreeing where necessary and agreeing that, look, this is a value chain. A problem in generation is a problem in distribution. A challenges in the transmission layer is a problem in the value chain, and every player in the value chain must be concerned and must live up to his or her obligations. Yes, we've been saying this long before now, that we need a sustainable system, a system where the electricity value chain will be self-sustaining. We should have a situation whereby the electricity industry can fend for itself. We have been saying this, and I believe the Nigerian electricity consuming public will now come to understand that, yes, this product called electricity has cost, and unless and until we are ready and willing to shoulder the cost of generating, transmitting, and distributing electricity, and perhaps providing a little incentive to those who invest their resources and their time in getting this electricity to our various homes, offices, and factories, we cannot have a kind of any sustainable development in the power sector.
All right, thank you very much, Idris Mohammed, there for your comments. We'll return to you shortly. Now, earlier we said we're going to be joined by a guest from the GENCO's side, Dr. Joy Ogaji, who is the Executive Secretary of the Association of Power Generation Companies, is joining us now for this conversation. Dr. Ogaji, I hope you've had the benefit of listening to some of the comments by the other guests as to the challenge that the operations of the GENCOs have had on the transmission and also on distribution. There are claims that your activities have impacted the national grid, and therefore we are having the kind of situation that we are having. What is the situation?
Thank you so much. Good morning, and a good morning to Nigerians for granting the GENCOs an opportunity of fair hearing. Apparently, as we all know, the sector stands on a tripod, like in a photography, a photographer's a tripod. And one of those legs is a generation. The other two is transmission and distribution. However, we could say there is a fourth leg, and the fourth leg should be NBET, because when the privatization was being designed, the illiquidity of the sector became a very topical issue. And the investors insisted that they needed a sovereign guarantee for them to come into the sector. At first, GENCOs were promised the sovereign guarantee through World Bank PRG, which the NBET MD should confirm because he was very much around in the market. However, as soon after the GENCOs paid 25% of, after picking their bids, that decision was changed, and the government then under the Minister of Finance, Dr. Ngozi Uwela, he advised the government that if the government gave the Gencos the sovereign guarantee, the country will collapse and the country cannot sustain. So the investors were pleaded with, and they said, however, we are going to bring a bulk trader, an embed that will be capitalized with a revolving capitalization. I was listening to Odion. Odion was stating the issues as they should. You will hear it, because a situation where when you need power, you call on Gencos, we need power. But according to them, only 5 PPAs are effective. What is the cumulation of the 5 PPAs in the market? Can we have the quantity, the contracted quantity for the 5? Because then it shows that government only need power from those 5 PPAs. And the 5 PPAs are Azura. Azura has less than 500. Ajip also has less than 500 megawatts. Shell. Then Pacific in total of the Oloroshogo and Omotosho part put together have about 700. But the system operator has not been able to discharge them fully up to 700, because the owners of the plants are even complaining that though they have an effective PPA, I said, yes, you can see, I put it on quote, effective PPA, but yet the grid does not dispatch them fully. So possibly we are paying for capacity and the owners are waiting to put it, but then we are not taking it. So there are so many issues. But let me go straight to continue to say what I was saying. So MBET was introduced. Now, what is the mandate of MBET? MBET's mandate, like I said, was to be capitalized, and they will cover up the difference between what the discos pay and the invoice of the Gencos. And MBET came into existence as in started operating on the 1st of February 2015. Now, prior to this time, there was the PPA, the legacy PPA, that's the legacy plants, and I want to list them out. The legacy plants are we have Ugeli, which is owned by Transcorp, Egbi, we know still owned by Egbi Power PLC. We have the Sapele at Ogorode. We have Geregu at Kogi State. And we have a Mainstream made up of Kainji and Jeba, and Shiroro owned by North-South Power. Now, these 6 Gencos, we are the legacy Gencos. And when they entered the contract, they were told that they will be paid 100% for capacity they will make available. I have the papers to if you have the opportunity to project it for Nigerians to see at the time of takeover, what was the capacity, and currently what is the capacity and what is being utilized. I have it if it is possible to be projected. Okay, yes, I was told I can project it. I don't know if it is being seen. Yes. Now, this is the sheet from 2013 till now. From my right-hand side, the first column actually shows what Gencos have made available.
Dr. Joy Ogaji, we appreciate the historical account you are giving. But we are faced with a current challenge, and we know that the challenge also has its roots in the history you are trying to tell us. Because we are pressed for time, and we have 7 guests on this program, there are critical issues that have been raised. They talked about the absence of gas for you to fire your power plants, that's for the thermal plants. They also talked about scheduled maintenance and the issues that I would like you to address, as well as water management from the Genco side. Why would all of these 3 issues coincide or collide at this time to put us where we are today?
Thank you, sir. I will answer that question. Mr. Odion, again, I make reference to him because when he was speaking, he alluded to the reasons responsible for it. And I corroborate his point by also adding my voice. Prior to this time, before my current role, I was in the Presidential Task Force. And we were part of the team that designed the privatization. And knowing that planning is very, very critical in any sector, planning was put on ground. If you recall, there was a roadmap, a privatization roadmap. Part of those roadmap was planning the seasons in terms of hydros and thermals. Now, we all know this is not the first time that this season, hydros will go down because of low water. And according to plan, the thermals naturally will ramp up capacity, as in they will be producing at their optimum. But why were they not able to produce optimally? Yes, we can give the excuse of AGIP. How many megawatts is AGIP? MBET has a contracted quantity that is well over 10,000 megawatts. If AGIP is out, AGIP is less than 500. Why should AGIP alone affect the rest? Currently, we have about 85% of power that is generated in Nigeria is from gas. That means 85% of them should have come up by this period. Why were they not up? There are two answers to it. One of them is because of the contract management that Odion adduced to. When you decide to keep just 5 GENCOs to be active, and even those 5 GENCOs that you said you have active PPAs, you are not paying them fully for it, because I spoke with them. They are not paid fully, even though we claim to say they have active PPA. Not only that they are not paid fully, they are not also dispatched optimally, as in not all their capacity is taken. Or the owners of Pacific, Olorunshogun and Omotosho, have mentioned that the system operator is not taking up to their 700 megawatts. So you know already one of the reasons why we are where we are. The third one is gas. Now we've been mentioning gas. When you mention gas challenges, whether the gas pipelines were vandalized, even if they were not vandalized, without a so-called effective PPA, how will the GENCOs pay for the gas? Gas is prepayment. Gas is prepaid, unlike electricity you consume and then we beg you to pay later. Gas, you pay before service. So without a bankable PPA, without an effective contract, without the securitization, as in a bankable letter of credit, which the PPA mandates MBET to post to the generation company, how can they even make gas available? So the issues are planning, and it has to do with bad contract management, and it has to do with I don't know the right word to use other than say we are living in self-denial, and also lack of sanctity to contracts. You signed a contract with the GENCOs that they should bring up capacity, and that the distribution and the transmission will transmit and distribute respectively. Then, 9 years down the line, you now saw that the distribution and the transmission is not meeting up. And because and as a result, the generation companies should hold on. Remember that these people are taking loans. They are paying for insurance for their power plants. They are paying for O&M, that is operation and maintenance. They are paying for so many things to keep that machine running. And when, like the Olorunshogun and Omotosho that I keep giving as an example, because that is what they said is effective. So even the effective one, you are not fully taking it. So if you're not fully taking it, how will they maintain their machines? Very soon, I won't be surprised when we hear that because we have been taking only 300, we will pay 300, notwithstanding that your PPA is effective. So we need to tell ourselves the truth. We need to learn to keep the sanctity of contract. We need to be disciplined and ensure that what we say is what we do. I don't know if that answers the question. If not, I'm ready with more facts. Thank you.
It does aside to a great extent, really. The facts will come out much later as we discuss this issue, because that is what Nigerians really want to hear. Dr. Iweluka, I mean, your name sounded so very much and so many times in the, Ogaji's submission here, and it so seems as if the NBET has been there now almost 10 years, 9 years now, and then the difference has not been so much seen in the fact of the sense that Nigerians are yet to really get the power they are supposed to get, and then so much questions are being raised. Looking at this present situation we have at the moment, how would you respond to these issues she raised?
Thank you very much. And also a big thank you to all the other discussants for the different perspectives they brought to bear on the issue. First of all, just to again clarify on the issue of indebtedness, when you hear of NBET's debt, what that really means is sector debt. Now, I had mentioned earlier that the total indebtedness stands at about 555 billion, including interest. Over the 2015, when NBET said training electricity market till date, we've received invoices of about 4 trillion naira from generation companies. Of these 4 trillion naira, NBET has paid 3.46 trillion. And so the balance that you find there, at the moment, the federal government is working to address holistically the funding challenges of the electricity market, which is why the government is implementing what is called the Power Sector Reform Recovery Operation. Within that Power Sector Recovery Operation, the different debts are being settled, and also, more importantly, the root causes of the liquidity problems are being addressed, so that you don't just settle debts that continue to accumulate. Those root issues relating to the tariffs that distribution companies charge to end-use customers, so that at the end of the day, you have a power sector value chain that is cost-reflective, where all the cost elements along the value chain are addressed to the market. The second thing I'll add is that with respect to contracts, NBET and NERC are currently working on a framework, NERC, the sector regulator, on a framework to progressively increase the capacities that are firmed up by generation companies. Now, why is it been? What we're looking at is a phased activation of other contracts in the market. Why is it phased? Because I noted earlier that the power sector is a value chain. If you activate contracts that exceed the capacity of the value chain, essentially, if you have more generation capacity than can be transmitted or can be distributed, what you end up having is a bigger problem. Because what it now means is that you have humongous generation that cannot be transmitted or distributed, but which has to be paid for. Now, what the government is doing, like I mentioned earlier, and for which the government deserves a lot of credit, is that the different challenges along that value chain are being addressed. It's not just that because there's an emergency problem. No, it's not just because an emergency problem. The government has several critical reforms that are going on as we speak to address both the commercial and financial challenges of the sector, as well as infrastructural challenges. And these reforms include the Power Sector Recovery Operation that I mentioned earlier, which is addressing issues pertaining to tariff shortfall, for which the government has made funds available through the World Bank, the Budgetary Appropriation, and Payment Assurance Facility. The federal government is also implementing the FGN Presidential Power Initiative aimed at addressing holistic transmission and distribution challenges in the sector. There's a presidential mass metering initiative going on. Transmission and distribution interface projects are being addressed by TCN. The
there are more
plans with different distribution companies, so that everything you're making available from the generation companies can actually be distributed at the TTP end. TCN is implementing grid enhancement.
Dr. Iweluka, please, if you wouldn't mind, let's just hold you there for a while and then come back to Dr. Sule Abdulaziz here. And then, you know, get the facts straight. To date, I mean, those watching this program at home might have been wanting to know exactly how comes that we're still facing this problem. If for the past 1 hour, we've just been really touched the real nerves of the issue. That's talking about transmission to the Nigerian populace, okay? The bulk, the GENCOs, and then the NBED are still, you know, talking about things Nigerians could not really understand because of, you know, so many grammar and lots of them there. But what the Nigerians want to know is, how comes we, say, give light to some countries in West Africa that have this light consistently and without any wink, and here back home we find ourselves still, you know, not even getting enough in numbers of hours, talk less of having the whole day, and things like that. And here comes this kind of crashes. And when this kind of grids crash and then there's this problem, they hardly affect, you know, these countries, I would say.
Thank you very much, sir. This is a question Nigerians have been asking, and we have been talking about explaining it, but I think up to now, it's not very clear. What you have to understand, in the national grid, there are some countries we used to supply light to, like the Niger, Benin, and Togo. Whenever there is system collapse, they are also affected because we are on the same grid with them. And this relationship has taken a long time, especially that of Niger. Historically, we know that the Niger people wanted to build a dam on the Niger River. But since in the 60s or 50s, our political leaders has a discussion with them that instead of them to build a dam, Nigeria will supply them with power. So this was the genesis. And I'm telling you now, up to now, Nigeria is paying for what we are giving them. On the other hand, which mostly is under WAP, West African Power Pool, what Nigerians do not understand, the power that is transmitted to West African countries is not the power that is supposed to be distributed even within the country. These generators, everybody will say, this is how many megawatts I'm going to produce. Then they have an agreement that this is what we are going to put on the grid. But when it comes to WAP, they sign a different agreement. They bring in new units that are not working before, just for them to produce power so that they can sell it to West African countries. What is the advantage in Nigeria? The advantage is that it provides more jobs for Nigerians. It provides more business. And in future, if there is any problem, those countries can produce power and send it back to Nigerians. So we want to make sure that that interconnection between West African countries, just the way it is working with Europe. So this is what is happening. It's not the power which is meant for Nigerians that is transmitted to those African countries. It is power that is generated for that purpose alone.
But if I would want you to respond to this, okay? This story in the Nation newspaper, it says federal government to stop payment for unused electricity, right? And it says the federal government will soon stop paying the unused electricity, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission Chairman Sanusi Garba said, okay? And it says, apparently accusing the GENCOs of lacking the capacity to deliver. Now, how would you respond to this? Lacking the capacity to deliver the necessary, megawatts to Nigerians, and of course, federal government says not going to, pay for unused one. Why is the unused electricity?
You see, all the generation companies, they have an agreement with NBED. They will say that, okay, I'm going to supply 2,000 megawatts to NBED. If they want to supply abroad, it is supposed to be out of that 2,000. If there's generating 2,005, they have to commit that 2,000 to the national grid, and they can export the remaining one. So that is what is happening. They cannot take out of what they have already signed with NBED and take it to West African countries. It's not done anywhere.
Thank you, Dr. Abdulaziz. Dr. Iweluka, once again, MD, CEO of NBED. I would like you to clarify this issue, but one of the last ones raised by the acting managing director of TCN relating to local use and then export of power generated. But one of the issues that Dr. Joy Ogaji also raised has to do with the PPAs. And you were explaining why you probably couldn't have contracts with all of them. I'm not quite sure that your explanation was clear enough. The other point is what Odino Omofoma equally raised about maintenance, about gas. Why is it that you don't have multiple, if you like, contracts with other gas producers, so that if one disappoints you, you can rely on another, especially because as you are wedged between the Gencos and others in the value chain. So scheduled maintenance and so on and so forth. Do you have any interest in this? And if so, how do you try to get whoever is maintaining to streamline their operations without disruption of the value chain?
Thank you very much. You raised, I think them in that order. The first was the issue about the international customers, like Mr. Abdulaziz, Engineer Abdulaziz raised. The River Niger, Nigeria is downstream within River Niger. So River Niger passes through Niger Republic, also passes through Benin Republic before getting to Nigeria. And on a political level, there was an understanding that Nigeria could dam the river down, even though it's further down the river, but Nigeria could put its dam there. But as a way of discouraging those upstream, that is Benin Republic and Niger Republic, to discourage them from damming the river above us, which will of course cripple Kainji Dam. To discourage them, Nigeria committed to providing them electricity. And so it is it's not just like a goodwill gesture of just providing electricity to other nations, but it actually helps us strategically, economically, and politically to be able to supply power so as to make sure that no other country puts a dam above us within the River Niger. The second point I wanted to touch on is the issue of contract activation. Like I mentioned, MBET is working on a template with the under the guidance of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission to progressively activate contracts on the electricity value chain. Now, why is it being done in a progressive and incremental manner? From a system planning point of view, when you want to unleash more generation capacity onto a system, you equally need to be sure that the system is robust enough to transmit and distribute this extra power you're bringing onto the grid. And so it's a holistic arrangement that involves MBET and TCN and the regulator to make sure that the system at any point in time is able to utilize whatever capacity is being brought onto the system so that you don't have a case of stranded capacity across the value chain. The last point you raised had to do with could you remind me again the last point?
Right. I was talking about the issue raised by
the issue of maintenance.
Maintenance.
Yes. Yes. On the issue of maintenance, the MBET does not have the different generation companies have maintenance agreements with their respective O&M operators. Now, for a whole range of reasons, it may be challenging to defer maintenance because you can defer maintenance, but what that means is like when you don't, if your car is due for servicing and you don't service it, yes, the car can continue to run, but what it also means is that that car can disappoint you any day. And so the different, there are about 25 generation companies that we purchase electricity from. They have their different maintenance schedules, which of course we try to harmonize. But having said that, there's also a danger in telling a generation company to defer a scheduled maintenance. You run the risk of that generation company, that generation plant exceeding its its operational limits, such that you end up having a bigger problem if that plant ultimately goes down due to deferring scheduled maintenance. And so it is something that it's unfortunate that this time around the gas-related issues are playing out at the same time the hydro level is down. But what I can assure the audience in the studio, as well as the broader Nigerian audience, is that the government is not staying idle. There's a holistic, coordinated addressing of the challenges that are being felt now, but not just because there's an emergency. That's the point I'm trying to make. There's been a holistic tracking of several reforms aimed at delivering on both the infrastructural components as well as the commercial elements of the challenge. It's deep-rooted, and I'm confident that the kind of systemic synergy I've seen from the presidency to the Ministry of Power to the Ministry of Finance and other key stakeholders, the challenges that are being felt at the moment will be overcome. The government feels the pain, and we're addressing that pain. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Iweluka. The question now to be asked when we come from the break is how or for how long will this situation continue, or this load shedding and this blackout across the country continue? You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. The issues in power supply in Nigeria is our topic this morning. We'll now take a break. Stay with us. We'll be back to answer this and other questions as we progress to the end of the program.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We still have all our guests with us and discussing these issues. We hope that as viewers out there are finding some illumination as to what is happening. Of course, ultimately what we all want is buy your power credit, put on your switch, and then you have light. So let's bring in Engineer Mamalawa one more time, ED, Independent Systems Operations. Systems perspective now. The issue of planning has been raised. That's to say, planning amongst all the stakeholders. You do your own internal planning amongst all the stakeholders to anticipate some of these situations that we are faced with now, and how to clear whatever clogs there are. So tell us, are we failing to plan and then also failing to execute whatever plans we have to say if a crisis comes, how do we respond?
Thank you very much. The fact is that we plan, and in our reckoning, we plan very well. We have always planned. Precisely a week ago, we had what we refer to as a joint generation operations planning meeting. It comes up twice in a year. That is, it is biannual. We did this, to assess grid resources and find a common strategy to optimize those resources. Of course, we plan to maximize gains, minimize losses, to ensure we're able to handle risks appropriately and manage uncertainty. All these were brought, into the scheme as we conducted the planning exercise. However, when it comes to implementation, we are faced with varied encumbrances, impediments that were never expected. Of course, we also have a contingency assessment of a grid situation and try to pursue, the outlook we forge in the course of time. If I can take you back, about this time last year, grid performance was at its peak about this time. And the question goes, why is it that we're having this kind of situation this year? You see, there are certain variables in the performance indices that we really have to fix. And one of them is this gas. There has to be a firm undertaking to make gas available. But I must say, the government is trying. Only last Monday, the Honorable Minister of Power called a meeting and interacted with critical stakeholders in the sector so pretending over the mechanisms we can put in place to ensure gas is available. I think we are beginning to see the outcome. Okay, the gas transporters have given undertaking to pursue this. The Honorable Minister himself actually dwelt on this when he appeared on set. So the government is actually trying. Our expectation is that, we can still take this further by modulating some other issues that militate against the actualization of our plans. Also, annually, we hold what we refer to as hydro generation planning. We know the seasonal impact on generation, so we try to capture the essence of these factors in our plans. So we do plan, as a matter of fact, like I said.
Are the dam managers part of your meetings?
Of course, yes.
Have they talked about desilting those dams? Desilting. You know why I'm asking this question? We've had the Honorable Minister of Water Resources and other guests discussing the state of our dams. And part of the reason why sometimes we have flooding in some locations is because those dams do not impound enough water. They are silted. So when you now say dry season, you're having low volume, perhaps if those dams were desilted, this question of low volumes might not emerge. Do you have those meetings with them? And what do they say?
Yeah, we meet with them. We meet with them and we discuss, issues that we felt can improve performance in the industry. For instance, every hydropower plant has its utilization capacity, utilization factor, if you will. A power plant may decide, for instance, that they want to run for only 6 months in a year. Others will want to spread their output, so that they are available throughout the year. Perhaps, it is necessary we put in context grid exigencies such that, the run patterns are flexible, so that whenever we have critical operational issues, we can commit more units to make up for such deficiencies. And we're already in discussion. We're already discussing all this with them. So we're already discussing this with the hydro power plants. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Engineer Lawan. Fadupe, it's been a while you didn't say anything. I've been seeing you nodding your head there. You've been trying to put across some other few issues. But you being a past sector, policy analyst, and of course you deal with key players and then the consumers, and I can see the passion in you talking about how this light is still, a wanted, property in Nigeria. We're heading towards the end. We're heading to the end of this program. What would you advise, for instance, the players in this sector, the government, and of course the consumers? Consumers really have the money. They have the money to give and to pay and then get the lights because Nigerians are good at that. Just give us the service we pay. But you don't see the service now. What would you tell them? What would you tell the government? What would you tell, the key players, at least in some few minutes?
Thank you for that question. I think it's important for all sectorial players to come back to the drawing board. Like I said initially, customers are quite sad because at the end of the day, the issue is, are the customers happy with the current situation? The purpose of these facilities or this service in this country is for customers to have it for their use. But when it is not there, it means that there's a problem somewhere. I dare to say that anytime you bring sectorial players to the public space like this to come and defend or state what the situation is, then there is a major failure somewhere. And that failure has to be addressed. What am I trying to say? How will power get to the people? All of the things that we have said, they are things that should have been done in the background so that at the end of the day, the power can get to the people. Before privatization, the situation was not as complicated as this. But right now, the situation has become so complicated. You have had big overheads, government having contingent liability, paying staff salary, NEC is there, NBET is there, NEMSA is there, several other agencies are there, yet the power is not getting to the people. It therefore means that we need to do a root cause analysis and see exactly where we need to unlock this system. That thing has to be done. Otherwise, if we don't do it, I dare say, just like Odion said that we are going to come back to this conversation next year, I dare say that we may even be talking about this same problem in the next 10 years. Because in 2013, we started talking about this problem before 2013. 8-9 years down the road, we have not told a new story. We have not said anything different. So what is the guarantee based on probability? What is the guarantee that 8 years down the road, we will say the same thing? We will have anything new to say. We're not likely to have anything new to say unless government and sectoral players sit down together and say, what are the challenges? Where are we going to resolve this problem so that Nigerians can have electricity? Once Nigerians have electricity, they don't really bother about what is going on behind the cameras. They don't bother about what is going on in the offices. They are not even bothered about how much to pay if the product is available and the quality is reliable. Once those two things are there, over a period of time, market forces will correct all of the price imbalances or the high price, as we had it in the telcos. Market forces will resolve all of those ones. But now that we have this kind of situation, MBET is saying this, Gencos are saying this, capacity problem is there, and all of those things, we just need to get back to the drawing board and look at the situation. And look at all of the contracts, all of the agreements, all of the discussions all over again so that we can have electricity in this country.
Thank you very much, Bode Fadikwe. I think sometime last week there was a story that went around that the government has quietly, that was the word that was used, the adverb, quietly removed electricity subsidy.
Yes.
And that's why we all pay the correct tariff now. I buy 20,000 worth of units here in Abuja and I get only about 300 and something. But mostly it's been darkness these days, so the 300 and something remains. Nobody is eating that. Odion Omofoma, it's like we're going to get your closing thoughts now. Two issues that I would like you to use to frame your closing thoughts. Earlier, you talked about maintenance. You also talked about gas, which is also related to contracts and so on and so forth. And the MD of NBET responded to those questions. On the issue of maintenance, he was talking about the risk of deferred maintenance. But I don't know how most of the plants could be having their maintenance at about the same time. If NBET is really interested and it has a stake in this, couldn't they have a way of getting around this? A bit technical, but have your closing thoughts around that and any other point you wish to make. Odion?
Thanks. To your last point, I think you've also answered the question yourself. I cannot understand how many 25 thermal plants would have all the issues that they said, scheduled maintenance. And NBET is supposed to buy energy from them, and NBET says, I cannot tell you when to do your scheduled maintenance. You can do your scheduled maintenance before.
Oh, shame. Well, is it what happened, Director? Okay, now this is real life situation. The light went off in our Lagos Network studios, and that's why Odion Omofoma also went off the screen. The director is just informing us, myself and my colleague, through our talkback. All right. It says one of our transmission infrastructure has been affected also by the power failure. Now we understand the Zoom is also off. That's it. But let's rephrase the question and come to the acting MD of TCN, because one of the issues Weluka raised had to do with the contracts that they needed to sign with the Gencos. To say, assuming Gencos are in a position, just say Gencos and Hydros are in a position to produce 10,000 megawatts of electricity, they have to be careful what contracts they sign with them, because if you sign those contracts and they produce 10,000 megawatts, they have to take them through the national grid. And if the national grid doesn't have the capacity of taking those 10,000 megawatts, then you have stranded electricity and so on and so forth. But they have to pay for the 10,000. Now, the issue of the national grid has been on for some time. Namely, Siemens came in. We said that the loop of the national grid at some point was 70%. It was being enhanced. It was being rebuilt, XYZ. First, what is the loop coverage of our national grid? And two, what is the integrity and what is its capacity to wheel electricity to the distributors if you get from the GENCOs?
Thank you very much for this question. You see, what I want Nigerians to understand, for a long time, the grid has been compromised. There was no expansion and there were no new projects. But immediately this government came in 2015, everything changed. From that time till date, there is a lot of investment in the national grid. A lot of projects that have been ongoing for over 20 years, some of them have been completed. And new ones have started, and almost those that started from 2015, a lot of them were commissioned last year, and some are hoping to commission this year. But Nigerians should understand that it takes 2 to 4 years for a transmission project to be completed, because all the equipments we are putting in the substation and the transmission lines are not kept on a shelf. You cannot just go and pick them, even if you have money in your pocket. You need to give specifications. These companies have to go and manufacture it. It takes time to manufacture, it takes time to ship, and it takes time to install. So what I'm assuring Nigerian, this government is not sleeping. They have invested a lot of money, and with time, you are going to see these results. Since when this government came, over 1 trillion naira has been approved for Transmission Company of Nigeria on ongoing projects. So we're on that, and we want to make sure that Nigerians will have the hope of getting light. For the capacity, as of now, TCN has a capacity of 8,100 megawatts. So if today we generate 8,100, I assure Nigerians that TCN will be able to transmit this power to the end users.
Okay. Thank you very much. On a final note, let's hear, the closing remarks of Idris Mohammed from Kaduna. Idris Mohammed is the Corporate Communications Department, Distribution Company of Nigeria, Kaduna. Please, let's have your closing remarks, your parting shots on this issue. Distribution. I mean, how do we go around distribution in trying to solve this problem?
Oh, sorry, Kingsley and Yusuf. I actually missed the entire conversation lately, but I don't know what your question is, because I missed it. And what
I asked you, was your missing of the conversation due to power failure? If it, I don't know. I'm just asking what your closing thoughts would be, talking about distribution. Well, it so seems as if we also lost him there, but that wasn't really because of power failure. I believe because you can still see him. That's Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you so very much for being part of this program. We thank you really, Managing Director, Transmission Company of Nigeria, Dr. Sule Abdulaziz. This is our pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Bode Fadipe, you've been very, very, very instrumental to the success of this program this morning. Thank you so much.
I'm most grateful.
Engineer Mama Lawan, Executive Director, Independent Systems Operations. It's our pleasure. Thank you so much. We must also thank, Dr. Joy Ogaji. Joy Ogaji has been part of this program of late, really, and of course, she has really given us great insights into what we really need to know about this problem we're facing, the issue of power failure in this country. Thank you so much. We must also thank Odion Omon-Foman, Energy Expert and Chief Executive Officer, New Hampshire Group, who we lost much earlier. And that's it. We thank you so much also for being part of this program. It's our pleasure. Right, okay, we lost him due to power failure. Really, I even forgot about it.
Yes. That's Dr. Nnemeka.
Dr. Nnemeka, yes, of course.
MDC but we lost you at some point. Power failure. We know that you are not within the jurisdiction, so maybe that's why your system was still on. And when we got back, we were able to connect back to you. Dr. Eweluka, we appreciate you. Idris Mohammed from Kaduna joined us, as well as Odion Omofoma, who was in Lagos. So that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We do hope that the coming days will be brighter with more power supply to our various homes, offices, and factories and workshops. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Yusuf Narabu Usman. Have a great day.